With me is Kennie Prince, or Prince, rather. I don't want to say Price. Prince, good morning, Kenny. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Paul.
It's a pleasure having you. Excuse the throat here. It's a little fading fast, but I think we can get through this hour. First of all, thank you. What an incredible book. Let me read a little bit of this from Alfred Nichols here. Throughout the course of the memoir, Kenny relates dozens of captivating stories of covert wildlife operation, often spanning years, requiring ingenious planning. That's something I think you like. Challenging secrecy, careful coordination. His reputation for unparalleled success grew in national wildlife law enforcement circles. Many of these cases involved him agreeing to accept covert of assignments in other states, far as away as Idaho, North Dakota. Tight-knit circles of loyal and suspicious criminals are hard to penetrate. But Kenny had what it took to gain their confidence. A man of Kennie Prince's acting ability, broad knowledge, and dedication, hard to find, and he was in constant demand. Also, I didn't know this. You started your trapping age at the age of 8, retiring in 2009, but also taught a lot of people how to trap and always shared your knowledge, and one of them was with the Trappers Association, and has taught trapping at workshops locally and across the entire country. Welcome to the studio, sir.
Well,
it's a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me on, Paul.
I love the book. I love it because in this period of ADD that we all seem to have, where our attention span's not that great, we kind of hesitate on making the commitment to get in the book and to finish the whole book. Here you put these things in just the stories, and they are absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Are you still trapping?
Oh, yes. That's what I do now for full time.
All right. I don't even know where to start on this one. Lance, you can certainly jump in if you want to. But there are so many different stories on here. How did you leave any stories out?
Oh, yeah. I'm actually working on another one now.
Oh, are you?
Yes, sir.
Can you relate any of the stories, just to give the people who haven't had a chance to read the book, and there's so many, I'm not going to point to any one, but Lance and I were talking a few moments ago on some of these people that you hunted down for a long time that nobody else could catch. You sit there, and I think acting is a part of that, because one of the stories about Bob, it's hilarious. Can you relate the story of Bob?
Oh, well, Bob was supposed to work with me that morning. Bob was a special agent with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And he had gotten sick that morning, so I went out by myself. And later on that afternoon, when I was coming back through, I noticed the truck near the Big Black River, and just got after some guys roost shooting. And roost shooting is a hard actually to catch people because of the fact you only have a short window of time to catch them before it gets black in the woods. And once it's dark there, you can't run them down if they run from you. But to make the long story short, when I got after the guys, only thing I could think of as they ran from me through the woods was to tell them that Bob was out there. And so I hollered, "Get him, Bob," and when I did, they stopped. And after catching the guys, they even asked me, they said, "Well, where's Bob at?" And I said, "Well, he's homesick." So kind of made a little humor in the story, but
that was acting in a lot of ways. Did you ever get shot at?
I got shot at when I was in uniform. Never worked in covert.
Mm-hmm.
I always try to tell people, working uniform is probably way more dangerous than the covert work because you knew who you were working. When any officer, whether it be a uniformed patrol officer or a conservation officer, when they're approaching a vehicle and don't know who's in it or what they've been up to, then that's when the problem can occur because they're walking up nonchalant for a traffic stop or whatever it may be, and they walk up on somebody with meth or whatever.
Well, and also, as they say, in hunting season, you know that the person that you got to stop and you can have a confrontation with has a gun.
Yes, sir.
So it's kind of different in that manner. Plus the fact you're isolated for the most time. There's a lot of times, I guess, you could call for backup, but it's very doubtful that you're going to get it.
Yes, normally, especially with wildlife officers, your backup may be an hour away.
Do you stop in Mississippi? Do you stop for anybody who happens to be speeding and things like that, ancillary to just hunting and fishing?
Normally, your conservation officers, now they do have full police powers.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't stop anybody for just speeding due to that's just not their priority as far as work goes. But now, if they're a danger or a threat to, causing harm to somebody, yes,
if you can see somebody
them.
is legitimately DUI swerving back and forth on the interstate, I can understand, or on the road. You tell a story about one guy who was doing commercial fishing or seining, netting on Ross Barnett. And you do the stories great. I mean, they really are to the point of where you guys kind of have developed a symbiotic relationship. Kennie Prince, can you share that story?
Well, that was a fellow named Carroll. I called him that anyway. But, yeah, I got to chasing Carroll for years, actually. And he was good. He knew the Ross Barnett Reservoir better than the fish did. Mm-hmm. And after chasing him, and I actually caught him several times, but he got away more than I caught him. I'll say that. But we became friends through doing that, and actually one night how we actually became friends was we almost hit head on the lake out there as I was trying to apprehend him. And the next morning he met me in the coffee shop, and he walked up and he just asked me if he could sit down, and he sat down and looked at me there for a minute, and then he just told me, he said, "Look, that was awful close last night." So from then on, we actually became friends. We were kind of like I would always say, the coyote and the sheepdog watching the sheep. We would meet, go one way, and then we would sit down and talk about it the next day.
And to the point where you say, pay the fine and come pick up your net?
Right. He would show up at my house. I trusted him that much. I actually got to see him baptized at church. He started going to church with me for long.
Has he passed away?
Yes, sir. He is going to be with the Lord now.
Is commercial fishing, do you think people still doing that out on the reservoir?
I would say there's still a few doing it. When there's a dollar to be made, just like in any other element, there's going to be people that do it.
Kenny, you didn't start out as a game warden, though. You were working in another capacity before you actually went afield?
Yes, sir. When I went to work, there wasn't a position open as far as a conservation officer, so I started working in the fisheries division, which actually enhanced my career because I didn't realize what all went on with the fisheries in the state of Mississippi. I didn't realize we had so many fish in the state of Mississippi as far as different species. And in doing that, I got to learn a lot more about the makeup of our outdoors in Mississippi. I went from there to the game division, chasing alligators. With the alligators and working with the game biologists, it just taught me so much more. So when I was able to transfer into law enforcement, I had that in my background.
You've seen us go from alligators on a protective species to a hunting season. You've had some interesting calls, and some of those are stories in the book. Can you relate any of the alligator stories to us?
Oh, I could tell all kind of alligator stories, but everything from somebody wanting a collar back from the dog that the alligator got to actually having to get one out of a flower bed off of Ross Barnett one time. That I think after you catch things so many times, you start to get a little bold and think you're invincible, but good Lord has a way of bringing us back to our senses sometimes, and it took about a 9-foot alligator getting a hold of both of my hands. And
I read that one in there. Did you have to have some stitches and some surgery on that?
Oh, yes, sir. Actually, everybody thought the alligator was the one bleeding, and it was me because I had both hands.
He clamped down on both hands or one hand?
He had both hands in his mouth to start with.
Wow.
But I was able to get free from him, and we had to carry him with me to the emergency room, and the doctors wanted to go outside and look at the alligator instead of working on me when we showed up at the hospital. But
well, wait a minute. A man of your this is like Davy Crockett. How did you screw up so bad? What was the mistake you made?
Well, I had an officer with me that had never caught an alligator before, and he covered his eyes up, and when I eased up to put my hands on his mouth, they're easy to hold their mouth shut.
Yes.
Especially when they're worn down. This one was not worn down. They'll actually soil sometimes. So when he had soiled up in the flower bed, I was going to grab him and pull his head back. And when they get lethargic, when the blood rushes to the brain, kind of like a toad frog, when you lay them on their back. Well, as I reached down to grab a hold to him, the officer bumped what was covering his eyes, and just as I grabbed him, his eyes were uncovered, and he opened his mouth, and all in one instance, I had both hands in his mouth, and he went to trying to roll, and it got rough there for a few minutes.
Oh, he was trying to roll on you, too?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. And it was 9 feet?
9 foot. I was barely able to hold him back until...
Hold on. We'll be back in just a second.
Okay.
It is a pleasure and a privilege to talk to Kennie Prince about the Poacher's Nightmare, stories of an undercover game warden. I think in the book, a lot of people are talking about if there ever was a guy who was made to be a game warden from the moment you popped out of the womb, it's probably Kennie Prince. And they say that because, I mean, you country and you love the outdoors.
Yes, sir, I do.
At what point did you start thinking about that?
Well, my grandfather ran a bait shop growing up, and I was there after school and on the weekends, all weekends. So, and the game wardens would come by and sit around and talk, and all the local fishermen and everything. So I was able to just sit around and listen to those stories from some of the game wardens, and we always jokingly used to say that they actually hired the ones they couldn't catch. I don't know if that was so true or not.
That was going to be my question.
Yes.
Tell him how some of you guys got hired, because I hunted. I don't want to mention the name, and I know he's in your book, but I remember him before he was a game warden, and couldn't nobody catch him.
Yeah, I had several little run-ins myself growing up, and I think most young men, they get out and they can't count real good, or they can't read what posted means, and, they tend to want to, if a turkey's gobbling across the fence, I think that's like Satan. He's about as tempting as you can get right there. So we have to be real careful when you get close to a fence. But I think growing up, I was blessed with 2 Christian parents, and I had a great a father who kept me in the woods and kept me out of trouble most of the time. And like anyone else, I tended to run the wrong way.
Yeah, was he the one taught you about trapping?
No, sir. Actually, my father didn't trap, but I had an elderly man that would come by the store, and he was always showing off his catch, and he got me interested in it and taught me a little bit and got me going from there.
Yeah. What area of the state did you grow up in?
I grew up in Rankin County.
In Rankin County. Was there good trapping back in those days?
Back those days, we had a few beavers. Mink and coon were probably just as most trappers start out.
Yeah,
that was where I started, and then moved on to.
And there was a market for that. You could sell them and make money.
Oh yes, sir. That's where my father encouraged me. Is when he found out I could make $1. He started getting me traps for Christmas.
Did you have to clean them and tan the hides and everything, or just?
Well, just clean them and then stretch and dry them. I didn't tan them.
Did you make the decision, or did somebody make it for you to go into covert? Because that's a whole new ball game.
Well, I was working a lot with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service plain clothes, which is not undercover, but and they had some small cases that they asked me if I would be interested in working on, mainly guided hunts or guided fishing trips, things like that. And I started doing that, and it just, from one thing to the next, I started moving into deeper undercover operations.
Yeah. Some of those took a while before you actually caught the guy or guys.
Oh, yeah. Some of our cases lasted up to 2 years.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
What was it in Idaho? Was it big game for the most part?
Yes, sir. Idaho Game and Fish had contacted us about, they suspected a man was illegally guiding, which when we did the investigation, it wound up taking 2 years, but we had gotten in with the individuals, and he was actually, he wasn't guiding, he wasn't charging for it, but he was taking friends of his hunting when they would have small game license. They weren't purchasing proper license and things to that nature. So it wasn't quite the case they wanted, but it was still Lacey Act violations because they were taking game illegally, transporting them across the United States.
I think we had one, and I'm looking at the stack here. I don't think I still have it. We had one the other day that was in the news. And some of these things, we're not talking about one guy killing a single deer illegally somewhere,
No.
We're talking about people who actually go in and rob the resources, taking sometimes multiple deer, or if not, 30, 40, 50 sell them on the open market and things such as that.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
those are the people that sometimes you have to go undercover to finally catch.
Yeah, eventually, especially people selling game. And there's still a big meat market out there. You can tell a lot about what's going on by the prices they would charge for the meat, but there's some guys that literally commercially harvest game to sell for meat.
Is crappie one of those people would buy crappie, of course, that you can't sell it?
Yes, sir. Crappie is probably one of the best tasting fish around in the South. As far as most people love to eat crappie, and I'll say it's my favorite fish to eat. But you can sell crappie all over the United States. People love them, and although they're illegal, so you have people taking hundreds or thousands of pounds of crappie. So some of them actually catching them hook and line, but others are out as going as far as netting crappie and taking them to other parts of the country and selling them.
Crazy. Lance, you had a question?
I just wanted to ask, Kenny, where is the end user on such poaching where you have, as you stated, netting or killing a herd of deer and then they're selling that? Where does that go? You know, you catching them eventually, but where does that go? How does it get into the food chain out here in the marketplace?
Most of your small time dealers, they're just peddling them on the street. I mean, we've gone actually with some that we caught to see what they were doing. They would drive through a neighborhood selling fish or selling deer, anything like that. Now, raccoon meat is legal to sell, so they could do that. But that was a lot of times just their way of opening the door.
On the raccoons, like I could get you 2 raccoons a night where I live, in one of these cages that we have here. I've got the cages. I don't even put it out because I'll catch a raccoon, and I can't even believe that of course not going to clean it and everything else. Just let it go and relocate it, but raccoons are still probably the most plentiful of anything out there.
Oh, yes, sir. We've got plenty of raccoons.
Squirrels.
Squirrels, yeah.
Are you a squirrel dumpling man?
Oh, yeah.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I got 2 or 3 different fox squirrels, but the others are just a little gray thing. It takes 20 of those to make a meal. I want to ask you this, though. When you talk about somebody out there, a young kid, thinking, okay, I'd love to be a game warden, when you are a game warden, you've got your assignments, your territory that you go to. Do you set who the culprit is or where you want to go, or is it done from the main office, or is there kind of like a precinct patrol, or are you on your own?
For the most part, you're on your own. Now, they'll have details set up where if information comes in, and I would like to, I got an opportunity here, report wildlife violators. People sometimes they'll complain about it, but they'll never call in. They may know exactly what somebody's doing, where he's shooting deer at night, and things like that. They got to report them. They can do that on the 1-800-BE-SMART line to the Mississippi Department of Wildlife. But most of the time, the officers are on their own. They're out there working. They may contact another officer in the county because most counties only have maximum to 2 officers. A couple of counties may have more than that nowadays, but in my day, it was 2. Yeah.
So you kind of, Kenny, develop your own strategy and everything else to put this thing together. Well, if you go stop by for a cold Coca-Cola somewhere at the store, and they said, oh, by the way, Kenny, somebody's shooting out here. So you call somebody else and you say, hey, meet me at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah. They'll call you at 2 o'clock in the morning. I just heard a shot behind the house. So
you related one story that one of the guys decided after he dealt with you, and the way you drove a boat in the middle of the night on the Ross Barnett, and the way you went through a field, and the way you decided to hunt down somebody, that I this is enough. I can't take it. How many careers have you ended?
Well, that was the only one that ever actually quit, but I had some that wouldn't work with me anymore.
There was one was quite ingenious that you decided to catch them, and it may have been one of the ones we talked about earlier, that you knew where his truck was, and you knew how good they were to get away, so you decided to hide in the back of his pickup truck on the ramp. How long did you stay there? Relate that story.
I was probably in the back of his truck for probably 45 minutes or so, and once they started to pull out, I scared the guy a little bit when I raised up out from under the tarp, but he almost threw me over the hood, and I wouldn't encourage that. That was not a smart thing on my behalf. If I hadn't known who it was, I would probably have never done that. But
Yeah, because if they didn't stop you, would have been out for a while.
oh yeah, I'd have been in trouble. So it could have.
Poacher's Nightmare is the name of the Stories of an Undercover Game Warden. This is going to be volume 1, as we understand it. Some breaking news. And it's Kennie Prince. If you have a chance, go to Amazon and several other locations. You got a book signing anywhere?
I'll be in Kosciuszko this afternoon or tonight, and then tomorrow at I think it's at the Coliseum. They're having a little wildlife expo up there.
Fabulous. Thank you, man. Appreciate you
Yes,
coming
sir.
by. I look forward to talking to you again.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Kennie Prince, back with more coming up next.